So what on earth is a Fuggle? Let me regale you with 2 fun Fuggle facts. Number 1, Fuggle is named after an actual person, Richard Fuggle. Although history is not sure which Richard Fuggle, there are 3 candidates. And number 2, while Fuggle hops originated in the UK, there is another hop grown in the US with a completely different name that's actually the Fuggle hop in disguise. I'll reveal which one in a bit. So to better understand this hop, I'm brewing a pale ale using nothing but Fuggle with additions for bittering, aroma and flavour. And then I'm serving the finished beer to participants to learn what characteristics this hop will impart. I'm Martin Keane, and this is the Brülosophy Show. So let's get straight into brewing my Fuggle Pale Ale, starting with reverse osmosis water and an ambitious plan. Taking a bit of a different approach to the brew day today. So normally this gets quite chaotic and I'm moving this kettle around when I go to boil, and then I bring my fermenter over here and fill it up. I'm going to try to brew today without moving the kettle. It's going to stay here the whole time and the fermenter is going to stay over there, not moving it. One of the reasons I can do that now is because I've moved my vent hood over and above me here, right here. And that means that I don't have to push this all the way to the wall where the vent hood was previously. See how it goes. All right, let's mash in. Now the way the recipes work with these hop Chronicle beers is there's 2 standard recipes. There's the pale ale recipe and then there's a pale lager recipe, and I'm using the pale ale recipe. That consists of a very simple grist of 80% of pale malt and then 20% of Vienna. And I'm going to get this up to 152 Fahrenheit, 67 Celsius. Hold it for an hour. To help me better understand the Fuggle hop, I'm joined by Eric from CLS Farms.
My name is Eric Desmarais. I'm a co-owner of CLS Farms with my wife Shelley. We're located in the Yakima Valley, Washington State.
Eric told me that growing Fuggle brings about its own challenges.
They're much lower yielding, and so they're going to yield around 1,200 pounds an acre, whereas the standard variety will yield around 2,000 pounds. They're less vigorous, for sure. The vines themselves are smaller, so we do things like increase the string density. We increase the vine density per acre. We actually grow more vines because they struggle to fill the space. They make small spindly vines. They take more attention than some other varieties, I would say.
The story of the Fuggle hop is a bit complicated and uncertain, but here's one way of telling it. So Richard Fuggle was a hop merchant from Kent in the UK who took a hop seedling that was found in a flower garden of his uncle George Stace Moore and propagated it and introduced it to the public in 1871 as Fuggle's Goldings. Who Richard Fuggle actually was is a question of debate, as there were 3 different Richard Fuggles living in the area around that time. Richard Fuggle Sr. and Jr., both farmers, and a Richard Fuggle who was their nephew and cousin. Richard Fuggle Jr. fits the timeline best and is the likely candidate. Either way, the hop proved exceedingly popular, and by 1949, Fuggle hops made up 78% of the English hop harvest. Today, the Fuggle hop has extended beyond the UK. Fuggle was introduced into what is now Slovenia around 1900, where it became Styrian Goldings. And pertinent to today's brew, I'll be using the variety known as French Fuggle. Now the first hop addition is a first wort hop addition, which means it goes in while I'm coming to boil. So clumsily managed to get the hop sleeve in here. Gonna add in 30 grams of Fuggle. Fuggle is a low alpha acid hop, usually 3.5% to around 6% alpha acid, and it purportedly contributes a woody, earthy quality. Fuggle was recently introduced to France to take advantage of growing conditions there, and in most cases is fairly indistinguishable from the UK variety. Now, here's my hop schedule. There are a lot of hop additions here, a total of over 200 grams of Fuggle in a 5.5 gallon batch. But many of these are late addition or dry hops, so I'm looking at an IBU of around 45. Fans on, it's noisy. Now, given how much these hops expand, and I'm adding quite a lot of Fuggle hops today, I'm going to actually use the second sleeve. Bit better utilization that way, I think. 15-minute addition goes in. Now, we still need to hear Eric's story about the US hop disguised as Fuggle. and to see what our participants picked up from tasting this beer. But first, a quick reminder to consider becoming a patron of Brülosophy. By committing to a small monthly pledge, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished recipes, unique discounts at Yakima Valley Hops, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session. With the beer chilled and in the fermenter, I added Imperial Yeast Flagship A07, or the Chico strain, and about a week later it was ready for the dry hop. Now I've added the dry hop edition of the Fuggle 56 grams to this hop bong. I've not actually used this before, but this will allow me to add the hops into the fermenter without exposing it to oxygen, because I'm going to flush this with CO2 first and then dump in the hops. And while that beer is dry hopping, let's go back to Eric.
When Anheuser-Busch came and bought hops direct, our farm participated in that in a pretty good sized way. We had probably 100 acres of Tettnanger, what was called U.S. Tettnanger. We always would get German growers visiting us, and they all wanted to go see the Tettnanger fields. And so we go out to the Tettnanger fields and go, this isn't Tettnanger. And so Tettnanger in Germany has a red vine. The Tettnanger in the U.S. is a pure green vine. And so a number of years later, what I had several people come to tell me was really the U.S. Tettnanger was just a Fuggle, and it wasn't a Tettnanger. As I got involved in craft, what I learned was Fuggle and U.S. Tettnanger were completely interchangeable. And so a Fuggle grown in Oregon and a Tettnanger grown in Washington were the same basic aroma, basic hop, and brewers could interchange them, and did on many times.
So what sort of characteristics did this beer present? To find out, I headed back to Ancillary Fermentation, where participants were asked to sample the beer and fill out a survey on the aromatic and flavour characteristics they picked up on. Now, this was a professional brewing crowd, and even though this was a blind survey, meaning I didn't tell them which was the hop that they were tasting, they were onto me nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Fuggles or EKG.
If I had to pick a hop, I would say maybe Fuggle.
So here's what the 18 participants reported. The pungency was considered mild to moderate, which was very much in line with my experience. Despite the generous amount of dry hops added, the aroma was, to my nose, quite subtle. The average ratings of aroma and flavour perceptions skewed towards citrus and tropical fruit for both flavour and aroma, with some participants noting a prominent berry aroma and pine or grassy flavour. Least prominent were onion and garlic, and spicy and herbal. Tasters were then instructed to identify beer styles they thought the hop would work well in, with pale lager and pale ale the clear winners. Interestingly, despite the common usage of Fuggle in British beers, only 2 participants selected that option. Finally, participants were asked to rate how much they enjoyed the hop character on a 1 to 10 scale. These ratings were also in line with my own experience. To me, the beer presented as agreeable with a light citrus and floral hop character, but was very restrained overall. If I ever make a Fuggle-only ale again, not that I'm really planning to, but if I did, I'd be adding way more hops to try to bring up the intensity. Anyways, that's Fuggle hops. I used another low alpha acid hop, SARS, in making a lager for Mr. Brülosophy himself, Marshall, recently. You can find that video here. And stay up to date with everything we're doing at Brülosophy.com, the Brülosophy podcast, and the Brew Lab. I'll be back next week, and until then, think beer.